Welcome back to React Native Radio Podcast. Brought to you by Three Fish Riding a Bicycle. If you know, you know. Episode 300. 300, wow. Special edition, Ask Us Anything.
Hey everyone, it's episode 300, and we have something really special today. I'm Jamon Holmgren, your host, friendly CTO of Infinite Red. I'm joined today by my riveting co-hosts, Robin Hines, Director of Engineering, and Mazen Chami, Senior React Native Engineer, also here at Infinite Red. We're doing an AMA today, an Ask Me Anything, or an Ask Us Anything today. And we have so many submissions that I'm going to just speed run this intro and the sponsorship slot, which... Speaking of which, let's get right into that. This episode is sponsored by Infinite Red. Infinite Red is a premier React Native development agency located fully remote in the USA. If you're looking for React Native expertise for your project, hit us up at infinite.red/RNR. Don't forget to mention you heard about us through the React Native Radio podcast. How'd I do?
So quick.
Was that quick enough?
So quick.
It was very quick. Yeah. All right, we're going to get right into it. The Ask Me Anything, Ask Us Anything. What we did was we put out there into our Infinite Red community, the Slack that we put up there. You can go there, community.infinite.red, and on Twitter, and ask people, hey, what are some questions that you want to hear us answer on air for episode 300? I think it's super cool that we've made it all the way to 300 here. Of course, we took over around, I think, 179 or something like that, but it's still a really important milestone for this podcast. And we got some amazing questions from different people. I'm super excited about this.
Well, and we didn't just reach out to our listeners. We actually reached out to quite a few former guests.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And they sent in some really special audio questions. So you'll get to hear some familiar voices, too.
And not just guests, former host or co-host, rather, of the show. So,
yeah,
that's awesome.
This will be a really fun one.
All right. Are you ready for these questions? We didn't really prepare for these. Like, we're just kind of like listening to them and rolling with them.
Unfiltered.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. The first clip is from our very good friend, Becca, who, let's roll the tape.
Hey, I'm Becca from Open Sauce, and I am very happy for the team and all of the hard work they've put into the podcast over the years and all that you've accomplished. But I do have a question for you today. So, do you ever feel pressure to continually come up with new topics for your podcast every week? Looking forward to your answer.
Can you define pressure?
I mean, it's kind of self-applied pressure.
Yeah, it is.
We do put a lot of pressure on ourselves to make sure that we're picking new topics that are interesting and not just rehashing stuff that's already been talked about, and try to really bring our own spin to things. But we'll have weeks where we're like, oh shoot, we're kind of low on topics, and we have to kind of brainstorm. And it is tough because we want to put out the best.
We really want it to be relevant to the listeners. Like, there's a lot of situations where we could maybe put something that just sort of clickbaity or is just kind of like top of mind or just something we know. But we really, I take this quite seriously. Like, we want to be able to provide something that when someone goes away from it, they're like, okay, I learned something. This was time well spent.
I was actually a guest on another podcast recently, and it's a web-focused show. And they were kind of shocked that we are able to continually find new topics in such a niche space. Like, compared to the web world, React Native is very focused and narrow. And so the fact that we're able to come up with a new thing to talk about every week, they were pretty impressed.
It's a never-ending rabbit hole, though.
Yeah. I think another one is we try and come up with episodes timely. So kind of different from what Jamon's definition of timely, but based on what was released, right? So whenever we have a new version of React Native or Expo, we try and jump on it early just so that our listeners get the information as early as possible. Obviously, granted, we need to edit and kind of do all that stuff, but that's all part of it.
Thanks so much, Becca. That was an awesome question. We probably could do a whole episode on that topic.
It's going to be a theme. I feel really bad for our editors
know,
who
right?
are going to have to cut out some of our
Exactly.
rambling.
So, my good friend and a former host of the podcast before we took it over, Peter Pikarczyk, also sent one in.
Hey, React Native Radio hosts. I'm Peter Pikarczyk, first co-host of React Native Radio from 2015. How do you feel React Native has changed over the last few years since starting the pod?
So we took over, I think, around 2020, and that was, I think, right around version 63. So there have been around, I think, like 10 different, releases since then. I guess 74 now. So I think that's a big one. But the biggest change in my mind is the emergence of Expo.
Mm-hmm. We actually had Brent Vatney on the show talking about this new thing, with this new era of Expo that they were working on, called Expo Application Services, which he explained, and it hadn't come out yet, and they were very excited about it. And so we kind of heard firsthand about this new thing, which now we've talked about on the podcast countless times. We love it. We use it. So for me, watching that evolution firsthand and kind of being there as it happened was really cool.
Absolutely. And the irony here is Peter was the very first Expo user outside of Expo themselves.
What?
Yes, for his startup, what was it called? DraftBit, I think. And he was the very first one. So there are a lot of other things that have changed. Certainly, but a lot of it was driven by Expo. And then, of course, the new architecture is a huge deal.
This is another question that we could do a whole episode on. And we actually did pretty recently.
We did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think hasn't come out yet, but probably will have.
It also went sort of from new bleeding edge technology to now enterprise adoption.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. It definitely feels like it's a thing that big enterprise companies are choosing rather than kind of bleeding edge trailblazers.
All right, he has two other questions. Let's listen to the next one.
Do you think Tailwind will take over once Native Wind is ready to go live?
This is a great question. And I think the easiest answer, and I'm kind of debating even saying this, but it kind of comes down to what you want to do. I think React Native should try and stay away from a Tailwind, a Native Wind, styling system, styled components. Stay away from all that and let the individuals and the teams kind of make those decisions. I don't think any one will take over from the other because it all depends on your requirements, right? If you have web involved, does Tailwind handle web? It does, spoiler, but still, styled components work with web. Would you rather use Tamagui? Would you rather use React Strict DOM? There's so many options out there. I think it just depends on your business, your app, and your needs at the end of the day.
Yeah, I see StyleX from Meta as being kind of a big influence as well with React Strict DOM. So we'll see. I mean, if a developer is already using Tailwind on their web stuff, they're probably going to want it on native, and that's kind of the determining factor.
Exactly.
All right, last question from Peter.
What parts of React Native do you think still suck after all these years?
I
Who wants to take this one?
I used to call these the Robin questions.
I know, this is getting turned around
I
on us. We
love
usually
these.
ask people. Yeah.
I love this type of question. I think everybody in the audience would probably agree that keyboards still suck.
Yeah.
But they've come a ways. I think we have plans in the works for a whole keyboard episode.
Can't wait for that
pretty soon. So we'll dive into the details, but I don't think anybody enjoys working with keyboards.
No.
Well, and the operating systems have made it even harder because Apple especially keeps adding new stuff on top that you have to manage. It's never fun.
I still think that setting up Xcode and Android Studio and everything that you need to get your machine ready to do React Native work is still harder than it should be. I really wish there was a CLI or an app that you can just click a button and it just sets everything up for you.
Another benefit of Expo is it is possible to do local iOS and Android development without a full native environment setup, which is pretty cool.
All right. We also had a question, actually 3 questions from our good friend David Loulette from France. Let's roll that clip.
Hey, it's David. So my question for you is, what's your favorite podcast episode or the one you recommend all the time?
That's a very easy one for me. I think the TypeScript one that you both did is a big one that I recommend. And the pull request review.
I was going to say...
Art of the review.
I'm going to second that. The Art of the Code review is one that I tell people to listen to all the time. Even outside of React Native, I've sent it to family and friends and other developers in other industries because it's so universal and it's so evergreen. And I think it also was a really great, just like cultural episode that kind of gave a little window into the culture we have at IR and the culture that we value. So that's definitely one of my favorites.
I have, this changes all the time for me. I think my most recent favorite was actually our interview with Charlie Cheever, where he came on and talked about his early programming days, time working at Facebook and the beginning of Expo and things like that. So definitely one to go check out.
That's crazy. Our top three, not
React Native
specific. That's hilarious.
I mean, Charlie Cheever is React Native adjacent, but we really did not talk about React Native in that episode.
No, that's true. That's true.
So funny.
All right, let's listen to David's next question.
What's the biggest challenge your team had to face and how Gantt Laborde helped to solve it?
I love how he calls out Gantt as the one to solve the biggest challenge. Interestingly, in 2018, we had a really rough time, just sort of like financially as a company, Infinite Red. We were only about 3 years old at that point, and we hit some rough waters. We had a bunch of projects drop out all at once, and we weren't really set up we had some problems that we needed to fix. Gantt did help to solve it. He came on board as an owner, which was awesome. And it was a really cool thing. So now, of course, it's me, Todd, and Gantt that are the owners of Infinite Red. And of course, the team pulled through for us as well. And we actually came out the other side within 3 years. We had really made within 2 years, we had made a massive turnaround and got back on good footing. And now things are really rolling. So Gantt was absolutely a part of that. I would say that's the biggest challenge we've had to face.
I'd like to add also as someone who was a team member at that time, I wasn't part of the leadership team at all. And so I went through that as a team member. I just want to say how well the leaders handled it and how much it was clear that they were doing absolutely everything they could to get through it without affecting any of us, which they did. And they were nobody was panicking. They kept everything like really confident and calm. And, it really wasn't scary at all as a team member to go through that, even though I'm sure they were all freaking out. And we're very glad when they got to the other side. But yeah, it was a real testament to how strong that team is.
I appreciate that. And we did not have to do any layoffs, which was just absolutely like a high priority for us. Really great question there, David. What's his last question?
In the React Native ecosystem, what's the one skill you wish you had mastering overnight and why?
This is a great question. And I think it'll probably be different for all of us because we all have different strengths and maybe deficits. I really wish I could learn animations overnight, like really, really deep knowledge of complex animations overnight. Because you can do enough animations to get by, but it's so nuanced and layered, like how far you can go. And I would love to just instantly osmosis that.
Yeah, mine is kind of similar, but it's just styling in general. Because I suck at styling so badly, I would like to, of course, there's other things I'm more interested in that'd be nice to master, but those are a little bit easier for me to get into. Styling, I'm just sort of like, I want to get past and move to the next
Which
thing.
is so funny because it's my favorite part.
Yeah, that's why we work well together.
I agree. I'm kind of like trying to decide how to answer this question because a lot of it would probably be like native level stuff. But if we're talking about like the React Native ecosystem in general, I do have to pick like what Robin said with animations, because I think Reanimated changed the game, and I had just finished learning animated, and then you add in performance and everything Reanimated brings to the table. That's probably one that I wish I could master overnight.
Yeah.
I guess we should probably do another animation. We did a Reanimated episode a while ago, but we should probably do another one. All right. Next, our very good friend and Chain React speaker, Colin Gray, sent in a couple of clips. So let's listen to the first one.
Hi, React Native Radio host, Colin Gray here. My question, what is one library or feature that you would rather see in React Native Core instead of from third-party libraries?
That is a great question.
Wow. But how do you answer that?
So my first thought was things like React Native Gesture Handler and potentially even React Navigation, which is so universal. It's like every single project, the first thing you do is install Gesture Handler and React Navigation. So that would, from a convenience standpoint, it would be nice for those to be in core.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There's an argument to be made for Reanimated. Because, if animations are a big part, but there are apps that don't have any animations. So, I guess that's kind of a 50-50 there. I wish that like Expo fonts was built in to React Native because I like the way that it handles fonts, but I don't know, maybe others have other ideas.
I'm big on the Lean Initiative, so I don't know if I would say anything should be added, but I do agree, like fonts are pivotal to apps. And I think Safe Area View, that's a third-party package, right? I think that would be one that would be good to just kind of have
that would make
included.
a lot of sense. Yeah.
Those are like the two that I think are so fundamental that everyone uses on a daily basis that having fonts and Safe Area View within React Native makes absolute sense.
It's totally true.
But then like with navigation, what would you say to the people that like to use Router Flux or Expo Router and stuff like that?
Right.
Who uses Router Flux?
I was one of those first people. I'll say it.
I don't even think it works anymore.
I don't even know. I haven't looked at the repo in a long time.
I guess there is React Native navigation.
And Expo Router, but of course that uses it under the hood.
Gesture Handler, it feels like gestures are such a key part of any mobile app. You would think that would be part of core. And then Safe Area Context also feels the same way. I've never built an app that I haven't added those two packages.
What about async storage?
MMKV all day.
Okay. That's fair.
Yeah, it's one of those like give or takes. Like you never know which one you would want to use. Yeah.
All right, let's listen to Colin's second clip.
What topic outside of React and React Native would you like to cover on your podcast?
That's a really good question also. Great questions from Colin. I would love if at some point to talk about like the life as a developer in terms of like mental health and burnout and managing all of that. I think it's kind of a hot topic at the moment and it's relevant to a lot of people, and it would be fun to explore that at some point. I know ADHD is also a hot one. We've had some requests for that on Twitter because I know that's pretty common in the industry, so it would be fun to do that.
Yeah, you kind of stole my thunder. I was going to say developing with ADHD because, coincidentally, I was just diagnosed with ADHD. And so it's something I've lived with my whole life, and it'd be fun to talk about. And in fact, we do have a guest coming on who is kind of an expert in this sort of thing. So I'm really looking forward to that episode. That will definitely be a kind of outside of React and React Native topic, but still relevant to all of us. I would also say the business side of like building apps. I think that there's some, I don't know, listeners, let us know, like tweet at us at React Native RDIO. Tell us if the business side of building apps would be interesting to you.
For me, kind of like outside React and React Native, it would be more from the junior developer side and the mentoring. And not just the mentoring junior side, but also how to help people make that career change from whatever it is they're doing to mobile development in general. Because I've had a lot of people kind of ask me that question personally, and I feel like every time I answer it, they like see things differently from what you expect. Because one person was like, I'm already applying to get an undergrad in CS and then thinking of my master's before I do it. I'm like, well, hold on. Do you really need to do that? And then stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a good one. Absolutely. Great questions from all of these people who sent in the audio questions. Now, I have a bit of a bonus round here. We got a ton of Twitter questions and Slack questions. They weren't in the form of audio, so I'm not going to be playing that. I'll just read them. But let's hit these kind of quick. So Mark Rasavi, of course, legendary developer from Austria. He asked, which is a better approach to build iOS apps in your opinion? Swift UI with some UI kit components for legacy, or React Native? So this is interesting because I think he's talking about like if you only had to build iOS, you didn't have to do like cross-platform anything. Would you use Swift UI or would you still use React Native? I don't know. Like I'm a little 50-50 on this. I think once you go cross-platform, like you actually do need more than one platform. React Native's like business case becomes incredibly compelling. But as a developer, maybe I would be a little 50-50 on this. I do know that Orta, who is a former guest on the program, in fact, he was on, did he talk about TypeScript?
Yeah, he was the TypeScript episode.
Oh, he was
guest.
on the TypeScript one. Yeah. And he's amazing. I remember him going back to the Ruby days. He was involved with CocoaPods. So I remember asking him one time, like, hey, what would you build? Because he's an iOS developer going way back. I was like, what would you build in iOS with no expectation of going anywhere else? He said, oh, I would definitely use React Native. In fact, we already did that at my previous company. We didn't.
Interesting.
We shipped Android Native and React Native iOS.
Wow.
I was like, whoa, okay. That's interesting. So yeah, I mean, this sort of thing, it's pretty common. I guess maybe I'd still bias toward React Native just because that's what I know a little bit better. It's been a little while since I've done iOS Native just strictly.
I'm probably in the same boat, mainly because I have the strengths in React Native. I'd say React Native. But I think from a thinking business perspective, it would also always be nice to have that, I guess you could say, escape hatch to go cross-platform, to go multi-platform, where you're pretty much almost there, right? All you need to do is just get your little tweaks to get it working on Android, on web, on Mac OS, Windows, all that kind of stuff. So React Native, in my mind.
You're future-proofing it, basically.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Because if product comes by a month later and says, hey, we need an Android app out there, we're getting a lot of, asks for it. What are you going to do? Hire a whole Android team and kind of go down the Kotlin platform, Kotlin slide? Or are you going to be like, okay, cool. Give us a,
give us a few weeks and we'll get it running on Android. Boom.
Exactly.
Exactly. All right, moving on. Tyler Williams in the community Slack. He's the MobX State Tree maintainer. Tyler's a good friend. He asks, what would be a historical snapshot of subscribers, listeners, followers, or like what's the trend? It's always inspiring to see streamers who keep at it until they really take off. So when we came into React Native Radio, I think they had probably around 4,000 subscribers, something like that. It's harder to measure subscribers on podcasts.
It's very hard.
People use it in different ways and different apps and things like that. I think we're probably around 6,500, something like that. But we don't really look at that. That's not something that is important to us. I mean, legitimately, we don't look at it. Like,
well,
that's why we don't know.
We're not trying to get like sponsorships based on like, oh, you've got 20,000 subscribers, so we'll give you this amount for a sponsorship. It's not the business model for the podcast.
Yeah, and we kind of purposely don't look at how individual episodes perform because we don't want to lean toward like clickbait and stuff. What I at least for myself, what I kind of measure impact from is when I go to a conference and someone comes up to me and says, hey, I listened to React Native Radio and I really like it. And I want like that individual one-on-one, like, what do you think about it? Like, oh, this is great. This is something that really helps me. So I think that's kind of how I approach it. And as Robin said, we don't really have like sponsorship pressure. This is really just us doing this because we really enjoy it. We want to give back to the community. From the community Slack, Dan W asks, is it a priority for most companies and startups to have an app that works mostly the same on native as web? The risk of delayed approval or even rejection from app stores would be enough to offer your app on web. And it seems like the ultimate fallback solution for device incompatibility or app store issues. I like this question a lot, and I've been thinking about this a lot. And I do think that web is becoming more and more of a priority for React Native app developers.
I absolutely think apps that are on iOS and Android need to also have a web, a web version,
Experience.
a web experience, even if it's slightly less feature, even if it doesn't work quite the same or is like a more limited experience, there needs to be something. It's just, you never know what users you're losing because maybe they just don't want to install another app on their phone. Maybe whatever reasons they have. We have a client right now who their primary focus is iOS and Android, but they have a web component for that exact reason because they have users who are being required to download this app that don't have a smartphone, and they have to have a way to use it. You're alienating a part of your user base, and if you're using React Native and it's so easy to add that third platform, I see it as a no-brainer.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add. That's perfect.
Same, yeah.
Jose Carlos asks, I'd love to hear about memorable React Native moments where you or your team crafted or found something amazing or something funny that may have happened with a client. I kind of want to do the second one. Second question there. One time we came into a client meeting and the client had his shirt off. He's just sitting on the couch and
cool.
he's just, I don't know if he didn't realize that it was going to be a video call. And then he was just like cursing at his dogs at the top of his lungs. It was an interesting moment there.
Jed, our producer, is sitting in on this recording. You can't hear him, but he's laughing because I think he probably has the most funny client stories of anybody because he's been in the most client meetings.
Exactly. He's our director of operations and kind of like does a lot of that stuff. And there's some fun stuff.
We could do a whole episode
how about for either of you?
For me, mine is just, I feel like every time, like with a client, something funny happened where I had the client driving. They were a Android dev and I walked them through how to make a change. They clicked save and they were like, okay, now how do I rebuild? I was like, you did already, by the way. And they were like, no, like, what's the process? I was like, if you want to go get coffee and come back. Like, it's done. And we literally we spent more time arguing about the fact that we don't have to rebuild than making the change.
Yeah. It's just already fast refresh. Boom.
Exactly. And then just them posting a Slack saying, kind of giving me kudos for being patient with them at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And helping them understand. And they were like, well, React Native 1, me 0. So
yeah, that's a really great story. I love when people have those like glass shattering moments about how good React Native is that they didn't realize they had all these misconceptions about it that are like completely blown away in those moments. I've also just had a lot of really, really good moments with clients when we're able to do things that are really impressive to them. Just like getting an app on their iOS device and their Android device like a week after the project starts, and they're just like, their minds are blown. It's so fun every time.
Okay, so Temsys21 asks, is accessibility overlooked in the React Native architecture? If not, what are the best practices for making accessible apps?
Absolutely. I think it's overlooked in more than just React Native apps. And the second part of the questions, what are like best practices to making your app accessible? Before even making your app accessible, you need the team to be bought onto it, because without the team being bought onto it, you get a lot of stuff where developers don't put in the right accessibility tags. Your QA doesn't test for accessibility and all that kind of stuff. So I think even before discussing best practices, the team needs to be on board. So yes, it's way overlooked. Team needs to be on board in my mind.
Mazen really, really nailed it. The technical challenges of accessibility are really like missing the root of the problem, which is that companies aren't prioritizing it. they're not putting it on their backlogs. They're not like setting aside time for it. They're not looking for it when they're testing. It really needs to be a cultural shift before it can be a technical shift.
It has the same like problem and solution that performance has, which is someone caring.
Yeah.
And best practices, they're out there. It's just a matter of, Googling or finding, the right blog article or document link. They're there. I don't want to overlook that part of the question, but yeah.
They are there. They're less abundant than I kind of wish they were. I think if we can make that cultural shift and make it so that everyone is building accessibility into their apps, you'll organically see a lot more resources, blogs, tutorials, whatever, about how to do accessibility well, how to use screen readers, how to use all that stuff.
Yeah. Lizzie Linbo, who works at Infinite Red, she's a senior React Native engineer. She did a really great workshop on screen readers. And I pulled up the chess.com app, which I use all the time. It's native. So this isn't just a React Native thing. It was totally unusable. You could not use it. All right. So Alfonso Cabello asks, do you remember a key moment, a talk, a demo, etc., where you said React Native is what I want to focus on? Love to hear the perspective from Infinite Red team members.
Unfortunately, I don't have a great answer because I never had one of those moments. My intro to React Native was Jamon saying, hey, we're going to put you on the React Native team now. After having been hired
I was nicer than that.
You were very nice. I had been hired to do Rails and Elixir.
Yeah.
And it was quickly becoming evident that React Native was going to be our primary focus. And so it was like, okay, you're doing this now. And so I picked it up from there, and I love it. And I started loving it very quickly after I started using it. Yeah. But it wasn't really even on my radar.
That was a shift, though. That was a shift, for sure. Mazen, you did actually kind of opt into it. You weren't told by me.
Correct. Yeah, I opted into it. But I think mine is a little different. So I opted into it because I got a job where we were doing native development. I hated it because I felt like it was taking me forever to like grasp the different concepts. And then I had heard of React Native. I can't remember if it was a talk or something, but it must have been something around the Expo ecosystem. And I was like, React Native sounds interesting. And I started diving into it, and I started seeing a lot of value in it. And then I shifted jobs, and they're like, oh, we already have a React Native app. I was like, perfect, let's do it. And then I kind of learned on the job. And then Chain React kind of helped solidify that for me, just listening to the different talks and different people. So this was Chain React 18, I believe, where I watched the videos after the fact, and then I attended Chain React 19. So for me, just kind of learning on the job kind of got me hooked into it and made me see the value of hybrid versus native.
I love this next question from Stefan Wallen. He asks, how do you approach code reuse between clients other than Ignite, our open source, like, Project Starter Kit? Do you maintain closed source copies of clients' hush-hush apps after project completion? Do you push clients to open source apps? So, of course, we would love if our clients had open source apps because it means that we could talk about them. The vast majority of our clients, we have NDAs, we have fairly strict rules around IP. We take this stuff very, very seriously. So certainly if things we learn can go back into Ignite, we try to do that. If we can put them into the Ignite cookbook, which is ignitecookbook.com, we will put them there. Our clients are well aware of this. This is not something we're hiding from them. Like, it's very obvious, like, hey, we did this on yours. We'd like to put it into the cookbook so that other people can know about it. We try to share information from that, with our team and in Slack. It's always a balance of trying to make sure that we protect client IP and proprietary information, and also sharing. We have a culture of sharing and culture of open source and things like that. So it's a little bit of a balance to strike. But at the same time, we tell our clients, like, you're getting the benefit of all of the previous knowledge that we've gained from past clients. And then you're paying it forward by, allowing us to kind of learn from and develop our tools from there. So, yeah. I mean, obviously React Native itself and all the third-party libraries is a great way to share share code, going forward as well.
I have a running like list. You call it personal package.json file, where if I'm working on a project and I like that third-party package that we used, I tend to just kind of copy that package name and put it in that document.
I like that. Your
have.
personal package
Cool.
JSON. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like if like, for example, I'm working on a personal project or on a client project, and it's like, oh, I want to do, I don't know, say an onboarding swiper page. I just reach right in, I look in that and see if I have used one in the past that I liked. And I try and keep that edited as much as possible. Like if I use that package again and it kind of falls, I kind of remove it or just put it further down the list.
We got a question from Maruf Shitu, who asks, what can React Native learn from the Flutter ecosystem, in your opinion? So I have two that I would probably point out here. One is developer setup. I mentioned this before. I think that setting up for developer, like your developer environment in Flutter is easier than React Native. And then also upgrades. I think Flutter upgrades are vastly superior to React Native upgrades, although maybe similar to Expo upgrades.
I don't have anything to add.
Got nothing for Flutter.
That's it. That's all. Okay. No problem. Barrett asks, have you noticed React Native developers aren't as good at fishing as native iOS developers? Kind of weird, but I've seen this firsthand.
Is this an inside joke from Twitter?
It's yes, I think it is. I think it is. I don't really have anything to say. My brother is like fishing, professional. He writes for like a fishing magazine. That's his job. So he's the guy that is good at fishing in our family. He'll take me and I do well when I'm with him, but he doesn't do React Native and I don't really do fishing. So at least
I think
anymore.
there was like a whole joke going around Twitter for a while where that question was being applied to various different groups of developers, I think.
Yeah.
When you were reading it, I was like, this typo?
Yeah, it was a joke, I think.
Okay, we need to wrap up. Matthew Chisholm from the community Slack sent in quite a few really good questions. Honestly, these are fantastic questions. And I want to start with this question here. How many companies would be willing to invest in training teachers who could take that role on for students? I could see this either as having teachers work over the summer and part-time during the school year, or having a cross-company team who spend some of their time. Okay, I don't want to do this one. Never mind.
Yeah, no, it has a lot of
Too complex.
context. It's a very complex question.
I kind of like that question.
Okay, we need to wrap up here. And Matthew Chisholm from the community Slack, the Infinite Red community Slack, asked a really good question. It'll take a little bit to get the context here. He says, I just watched Theo's prediction video for 2024 where he said there would be fewer junior developer jobs because companies are looking for trust and wanting to avoid the investments of training a junior developer. And I felt like it really hit at a challenge I've been tackling the past few years. So how many companies would be willing to invest in training teachers who then could take on that role for students? And he kind of goes on with some more ideas around this, but I wanted to know, and I actually have some thoughts as well, but Mazen, I know you've taught a lot of junior developers. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think for context, Matthew is a teacher. So this is kind of where he's coming from. He's a high school teacher. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think from my perspective, I've mentioned it on the podcast. I do a lot of mentoring for boot camps and kids that just graduated high school that want to get into coding. This is part of that boot camp that I used to mentor. Mm-hmm. I think a big thing that we can do as senior developers, or even just developers in general, is give back, something I don't think we do a lot of. So my perspective on this is mentor junior developers going through boot camp, whatever the case is, but also give back to high schools and potentially colleges to teach like more pointed material, right? I think I looked, there's a teacher at a local school here, Durham School of the Arts. He's a computer science teacher. He was also a soccer coach with me. And he showed me his like quote unquote AP computer science material. And I told him this point blank, so I can kind of say it on here. I told him like, I use none of this material. So as a coder, this is not going to help me. I'd rather tell a high school student, skip AP computer science. When you graduate, if you know you want to do coding, go into boot camp. That's way more efficient route for you. So I think for me personally, I would say as developers, we should go into high schools, give presentations, give crash courses, work with these teachers to show the coder side of things so that we can then eventually give crash courses and mentor these high school kids to make a better decision on getting into coding versus not getting into coding. And that's actually something that I'm currently working on with that teacher to do a React Native crash course at Durham School of the Arts.
Yeah, I am a huge believer in this. And even though Infinite Red itself doesn't hire juniors anymore because of the type of work that we do, there are many people at Infinite Red that I hired as juniors, over 10 years ago and taught them to code. And now they're, building amazing stuff for giant companies, which is cool. I also, so for the community college that I dropped out of, I'm on their technical advisory committee. So I meet, 2-3 times a year to help guide their curriculum and try to get them relevant toward, industry standards and industry technologies where they can get jobs. I've given presentations at several high schools in the area. Did one recently, probably about 2 months ago. And they actually asked if next year I would come back and teach a class once a week. So I don't know if that's going to happen, but it is something that's on my radar. Like, it'd be fun. I love teaching. It's so much fun. We try to hire for people that love to teach. That was one of the things we loved about Mazen, about you, Mazen. Like the fact that you love to teach. You're also like a soccer coach and things like that. So, and then also it was several years ago, but I gave a presentation about React Native at a local college here in Vancouver as well. So I try to do a lot of that stuff. Also, YouTube, like try to put out YouTube content that is good for juniors and kind of helps them and encourages them. And I get emails all the time. People ask me for advice, and I try to give them thoughtful advice on, on their career. And I always offer to like help retweet, a tweet, try to, keep my eye out for jobs, things like that. So try to do things from that standpoint. I don't think it's necessarily in Infinite Red's best interest to change our business model to go after juniors necessarily. It's like we're in kind of a specialized case, and I could talk about that a lot. But our clients come to us for very, very high level React Native consulting, not necessarily just, additional bodies or headcount. So, but yeah, I try to do as much as I can, just like you, Mazen. Cool. Well, that was it for this episode 300, which was super fun. There were some very thought-provoking questions submitted. Thank you all. Everybody from Becca, Peter, David, Colin, let's see, who else? Mark, Tyler, Dan.
David. Do you get David?
Did I say David? I don't know if I said David. David, yes, David for sure. We had several others. Thank you all for submitting questions. You all are amazing. And that's, I guess, it. Robin, do you have a mom joke to take us out and bring us into the next 100 episodes?
I do. This one's from Darren Wilson on our team. Stephen King has a son named Joe. I'm not joking.
Oh, no.
But he is.
Okay. We'll see you all next time.
Bye.
Bye.
As always, thanks to our production team with editor Todd Worth, our assistant editor and episode release coordinator, yours truly, Jed Bartosky, our director of marketing, Justin Husky, and our guest coordinator, Derek Greenberg. Our producer and host is Jamon Holmgren, and executive producers and hosts are Robin Hines and Mazen Chame. Thanks to our sponsor, Infinite Red. Check us out at infinite.red/React Native. A special thanks to all of you listening today. Make sure to subscribe to React Native Radio wherever you get your podcasts.